Hello, everyone. My name is Allison. This is AllisonKnows. I am recording this for upload, and I am getting ready to talk about something that's really near and dear to my heart, which is construction. Um, my other business is building permits, and I've discovered that we are one of the few, if not the only, building permit business that is fully, wholly, and solely committed to the care, well-being, and protection of our contractors. It seems like we are looking at a changing of the guard. Where I am, we have approximately at least, I guess, 163,000 contractors. Yeah, that's a crap load. Um, and of that, I kind of work with a small portion. And as things would go, thank God, we are we are making our ends meet. Um, as I said, I am Allison. This is Allison Knows. So here's a question for you. What do you think is the most regulated industry in America? Banking, healthcare, aviation? If you guess any of those, then you'll actually be wrong. The answer is construction. Uh, and tonight, I want to tell you a story about how an industry that built America is being completely rebuilt itself, and why most people have no idea it's happening. But first, let me tell you about a phone call I got last Tuesday. Last Tuesday, I get this call from a contractor in Miami. Let's call him Mike. Mike's been building houses in South Florida for about 23, 24 years. Good guy, solid reputation, knows his stuff. Mike calls me because he's having a problem, not with construction, but with paperwork specifically. He's trying to get a permit to build a simple residential addition, which is known as an ADU, an additional dwelling unit. Nothing fancy, a bedroom, bathroom kind of thing he's done hundreds of times, a lot of times. And here's the thing, the permit process that used to take him 2 to 4 weeks is now taking him 4 to 6 months. 4 months for a bedroom and a bathroom. And so Mike says to me, and I'm quoting here, it says, Allison, I don't understand what's happening. It's like they changed all the rules while I wasn't looking. Now you might think, okay, bureaucracy got worse. That's not exactly breaking news. But here's what Mike doesn't realize. And what most people don't realize is that Mike is witnessing the complete transformation of an entire industry. And that's not just about permits. So while we're all focused on how technology disrupted retail, media, and the transportation industry, something much bigger has been happening in construction, something that affects every single person in America, whether you know it or not. Because here's the thing about construction, it's not just an industry, it's the industry. Construction employs more people than technology and finance combined. It represents 4.3% of the entire US GDP. When construction changes, everything changes, and it has changed completely. And not because of just the administration, well, the regime, and that should tell you where my thoughts are, but that's a different conversation. There's a lot of things. So let me give you some background history really quickly. Um, it is, and I'll sort myself over here a little bit because I'm doing dual records and as it should be. Okay, to understand what's happening, we need to go back, way back, and we're talking years. For most American, history It's not their thing. It's something they don't like to be about, see about, hear about, deal with. So let me condense it. Construction worked like this. You knew a guy, that guy knew how to build things, you gave him some money, he built you something, done. That's how it used to be. The regulatory framework we have today, most of it didn't exist until the 1970s. Before that, building codes were local, informal, and just often suggestions. But when something happened, a series of disasters in the late 60s and early 70s, buildings collapsed, fires, structural failures that led to what experts call the Great Regulation. Suddenly, every nail, every wire, every pipe had to meet specific standards. Every worker needed specific training, every project needed specific permits. Meet me, your permit service provider. And what do you know? Well, for a while it worked. Buildings got safer, workers got safer, consumers got protected. But here's what nobody anticipated, that the regulatory framework was designed for an industry that does not exist anymore. See, in the 1970s, specifically 1975, the average construction company had 12 employees. Today, it's 4. In 1975, most contractors worked in the same town their whole careers. Today, the average contractor works in 3 different states. In 1975, if you wanted to check building codes, you went to City Hall, looked at a book, found it, saw it, did it. Today, there are over 40,000 different building codes across the United States, and they change constantly. The industry transformed, but the regulatory system did not. And that's where things get real interesting, real interesting. Take a second, like, subscribe, share, support. We have a book that I wrote. It's called The Contractor's Edge. Support me by purchasing it. The link is in the ticker going across. Back to our conversation. Now, the technological disruption happened this way. Here's where the story gets really, really wild. While traditional construction was drowning in regulations designed for a different era, something else was happening. Technological companies started looking at construction and thinking, we can fix this. And they were right. Well, sort of, kind of. In the last 5 years, we've seen the emergence of what I call construction 2.0. Companies are starting to use artificial intelligence to design buildings, robots to lay bricks, 3D printers to build entire houses, drones doing site inspections. Not necessarily a bad thing, but the part that's important is not being fixed. And this is the kicker. This is where it gets really interesting. Most of this innovation is happening outside the traditional construction industry. The biggest construction technological companies, they're not run by contractors. They're run by former Google engineers, Amazon executives, Tesla designers, people who have never swung a hammer in their entire lives. So they're not just building better tools, they're building an entire parallel industry. And let me give you an example. Take Commentator. You probably haven't heard of them, but they raised $2.3 billion, and that's a B, to revolutionize construction. Their plan, bypass traditional contractors entirely. Now, what's interesting about that is I'm not eliminated from that particular practice, because permitting will always be the vein, the bloodlines, the bone marrow of construction, because you cannot do a build without plans. You cannot do a build without submitting your permit application to the jurisdiction, but that's not all that is involved. I have to be a jack of all trades. I have to understand every single particular contractor discipline and how it factors into the jurisdiction that you are in. So when you are seeing a permit professional, you as a contractor have limited your thinking simply by assuming that you can do your permitting in-house. The first thing about doing your permits in-house is you are going to lose $40,000 a year like clockwork. Why? Because my subscription services that I offer, and I offer to significant contractors, but a select few that I've taken on. And these contractors don't have to worry about permits. They don't have to worry about whether or not they're getting leads. They do not have to worry about whether or not they are compliant and they're working with artificial intelligence. That's all my territory, all my area, all covered by me. They paid me for that. So therefore, there's no concern about that. They're now focused on building. But I digress a little bit. Let me back up for a second. The most fascinating part of this story is what I call regulatory arbitrage. But before I get to that, as I was saying, design buildings with software makes sense. Manufacture components in factories makes sense. Assemble on site with minimal labor. Yeah, makes sense. But you're not rubber stamping bills. They're custom bills, they're industry bills, they're commercial bills. So Commentator went bankrupt in 2021, but here's the thing. Their failure wasn't because the idea was wrong. It's because they tried to replace the entire industry overnight. There are too many wheels running in this cog for them to do that. So let's get to regulatory arbitrage. The most fascinating part of the story is something, as I said, I call regulatory arbitrage. Remember Mike, our contractor in Miami? Okay, so while he's waiting 4 months for a permit, there are companies building entire housing developments in Texas using modular construction that bypasses most traditional permitting entirely. Not entirely true, but at the time it was, and that's since changed. And how it was possible then is like this. It turns out that if you build a house in a factory and truck it to a site, it's regulated as manufacturing, not construction. Gray area. Different rules, different timelines, different everything. However, let me insert here, the installation process has to be permitted because the site has to be prepared for the installation of the manufactured structure that you're installing. Even if it is a construction office for, let's say, a trucking business, you need an office. It's referred to in one category as modular. So since it's there, you are going to require external things, but you're also going to require utilities to connect it to, which needs to be permitted. There's a possibility that the structure may also want or require or is designed with solar panels. So if you want solar panels, that's also a permitted process. If you are changing out air conditioning, that's also a permitted process. So you do not eliminate the need to use permits for your build in all capacities. The only time, there are only 2 times that you don't need a permit, but you do, however, you must, however, have what's called a notice of commencement. And your notice of commencement must be signed by the owner, notarized by a notary public, and recorded in the county of your work. And the only 2 things that do not at this time require, and I think that's going to change soon, is pressure washing and painting, residential painting. Commercial painting, there's certain things that will bleed into it, such as right-of-way permits, such as deviating from the entryway if they're going to be doing it on a weekend or if they're going to be doing it when people are actually at work. But that's a different direction. Okay, so as I said, most traditional permitting was kind of removed from this particular example. Now, how is that possible? It turns out, as I said, you if you build a house in a factory and truck it to the site, it's looked upon and regulated as manufacturing, not construction. Different rules, different timelines, different everything. This is happening in most places. Companies are finding ways to work around a regulatory system that wasn't designed for modern construction methods. But here's where it gets really, really interesting. This is the part that should concern everyone. This regulatory arbitrage is creating two completely different construction industries. One is highly regulated, slow, expensive, and shrinking. The other is lightly regulated, fast, cheap, and growing rapidly. And guess which one is building most of America's new homes? That is of concern for anyone and everyone living in the likes of, say, South Florida. Seriously. Yeah, let's think a bit. Yeah. All right. So let's now move on to the labor crisis. And the labor crisis has been exacerbated, made worse because of this regime, because of their tactics, their methodologies of how they are trying to go about deporting people, mostly the wrong people, and how it is bleeding into my construction brothers and sisters' business, and it is creating stress, it is creating anxiety. These are people that they have trained for multiple years, that are reliable, that are good, honest people. And I have a couple of roofing contractors right now that are stretched and stressed to the max because they're dealing within the southern regions and they're going about repairing, re-roofing, and they don't have enough bodies to fulfill what they're doing. So they're losing jobs because other contractors are picking up the slack, but at the same time, it's now changing their income. It's changing their finances. It's changing, and it's not a good change either. It's not the kind that brings about growth, that brings about collective, just collective growth. It's not. It's totally parasitic. It's like it's crap that happened that didn't need to happen, but it's happening, and now we have to deal with it. So hopefully, within the next few months, we can get past it, and not necessarily return to normal, but return to what's best for the 300 million plus people that live in this country. All right, so let's talk about the elephant in the room, workers. The construction industry is facing the worst labor shortage in its history. We are short 430,000 workers right now. By 2030, that number could hit 2.2 million. Now, let's remember something. The housing industry needs houses, both regular houses for middle America and houses for low income earners. They need shelter too. Right now, we are at 5 million houses that are needed. And I'll make another video next about how I think, feel, see, and believe we can actually fix that by earning money, by adhering to the regulations within the jurisdictions of wherever you want to build low-income housing and regular income housing, and how everyone, as long as they have some modicum of income, can afford the type of homes that I kind of figured out how to build. We'll talk about that in another episode. So let's focus on it. So what's really happening, it's not just that we are not having enough workers. It's that the workers we have can't keep up with the changing industry. Remember, the average construction worker today is 42 years old. They learned their trade in an analog world, but the industry is going digital rapidly. I talked to an electrician last month. He was in Phoenix, Arizona. He's 28 years on the job, and he told me that half the systems he's installing now didn't exist 5 years ago. Smart home technology, integrated building systems, IoT sensors. He's basically learned a new profession while still doing his old one. And the young workers coming into the industry, they're not learning traditional construction. They're learning to operate robots, program softwares, and manage automated systems. We are witnessing the emergence of two different workforces in the same industry, and they barely speak the same language. And again, a bridge from A to B is who? Me, the permit service provider, because we need to know, and I know the movement from left to right and everything else in between. Okay, so what are the economic implications of this? Okay, so why would you care about any of this if you're not in construction? Because the transformation is reshaping the American economy in ways most people don't realize. First, housing costs. The regulatory complex I mentioned, it's adding an average of 94,000 to the cost of every new home. That number is actually changed. It's actually 194,000 to every new home. That's not the cost of that's not just the cost of materials or labor. That's just the cost of compliance. While the companies using new construction methods, meanwhile, sorry, the companies using new construction methods, they're building houses for 40% less. But those houses are concentrated in specific markets with specific regulatory environments. The results, well, we're creating a two-tier housing market, expensive, traditionally built homes in established markets and cheaper, tech-enabled homes in emerging markets. Second, employment. Construction was traditionally one of the most reliable paths to middle-class income for workers without college degrees. But as the industry automates and digitizes, these opportunities are disappearing. The new construction jobs require different skills, technology skills, data analysis, system management. They also pay better, but they require more education. Third, this is the big one, regional development. Remember I told you about the southern region? What do we have in the southern region that's a problem? Hurricanes, winds, floods. The earth is now changing. So we can't necessarily just slap up a wooden structure anymore. There's going to have to be a little bit more reinforcement within it. Yeah, things like steel drilling through all the way down as far as it goes. Why? Because the water is rising. So we need to pivot. We need to adapt. The ones that do that faster, permit service providers. Yeah. So the places that adapt to new construction methods are growing rapidly. The places that don't are stagnating. Let's look at Austin, Nashville, Phoenix. Cities that embrace construction innovations are booming. Look at older industrial cities with complex regulatory environments. They're struggling to build anything new. Detroit, Michigan. Okay. Now, let me give you a Florida case study. Let me give you a concrete example of how this is playing out. Florida, where a friend Mike is trying to get his permit, is actually ground zero for this transformation. On one hand, Florida has some of the most complex building codes in the country. Yes, we do. Hurricane standards, flood requirements, environmental regulations. Getting a permit in Miami-Dade County requires navigating 40 different regulatory agencies. I haven't even talked about Tallahassee or the Gulf Coast. Okay. But on the other hand, Florida is also leading the country in construction innovation, more modular housing, more 3D printed buildings, more automated construction than anywhere else in the country. The result, Florida is simultaneously the hardest and easiest place to build in America, depending on which system you use. Traditional contractors like Mike are drowning in red tape, but tech-enabled construction companies are building faster and cheaper than anywhere else in the country. Mattamy Homes. And here's the kicker. The state government knows this is happening. Now, I do not particularly like the governor of the state of Florida because he is not a governor for everyone in Florida. Case in point, insurance companies, they are gouging and sucking the lives out of people that are homeowners. Again, I'll do another video on that. But yeah, okay. They're not trying to stop it, they're trying to manage it. Last year, Florida created the first state level construction innovation zone, areas where new building methods can be tested with streamlined regulations. They're essentially running parallel regulatory systems, one for the old industry and one for the new. Didn't know that, did you? Okay. This is why you need to make sure that you have a permit service provider that knows what is going on. In addition to that, you have to remember something else. DEI has been removed from every single one of the counties in the state of Florida, and that's 67 counties with towns and cities included. What does that mean to you? If you have to ask yourself that question, you haven't hired the right permit service provider. Now, here's where the story gets really big, the national implications. What's happening in construction isn't just about construction. It is a preview of what is to come to every industry in America. Think about it. We have an industry built on 20th century regulations trying to operate in a 21st century economy. We have traditional companies struggling to adapt while new companies build parallel systems. We have workers caught between old skills and new requirements. Sound familiar? This is the same pattern we've seen in transportation with Uber and traditional taxis, in hospitality with Airbnb and traditional hotels, in finance with fintech and traditional banks. But construction is different because it's so fundamental to everything else. When construction changes, housing changes. When housing changes, communities change. When communities change, politics changes. And that's exactly what's happening. What is interesting is that President Biden actually saw this. This is why he implemented the transportation infrastructure bill. This is why he actually assumed that Dimrod would have just kept everything in place and took credit for the whole thing. But that's what happened when you give more intelligence to a rock. It does not budge. It still does the same thing it has always done because it is a rock. I digress. The places embracing construction innovations are growing, attracting young workers, building wealth. The places stuck in old system are shrinking, aging, and falling behind. However, a part of this too has been exacerbated by the tariffs. Where do you get your steel from? Do you have buddies in Canada? Where are you getting your shingles from? Who's making those for you? Where are you getting your underlays from for your roofing? Where are you getting your copper from? Australia is not sending us any copper right now. Why? Because Sweet Potato Hitler decided, nope, that's not going to happen. So yeah. So basically, we're sitting here and we're already hemorrhaging from a process that is changing faster than we can breathe our lives into it. And he has now added to that madness by doing the dumb stuff that he has always done, because every single thing he touches rots. I digress. It does matter that you know this, though, because quite frankly, if you're not able to feed your family, what happens to you? If you're not able to feed your family because you're unaware of information, you go out, you find the information, you repair, you adjust, you pivot, you get back to what you are single-mindedly doing, which is feeding your family. And if it turns out that the changes that you want to make, you cannot make as a contractor. You've already paid for your discipline, and now you are dealing with a change that not only is manufactured, it is fast moving. So, buy the book. It's going to help you. You need to contact me, 850-778-3110. I will do my best to get you in if you are a contractor that works on the Eastern Seaboard. Okay? Now, we're not just rebuilding how we build. We are literally rebuilding America itself. The regulatory response is like this. So governments are doing what about this? Well, it depends on the government. Some states like Florida and Texas are embracing the change. They're updating building codes, streamlining permits, creating innovation zones. Yes, sirree, Bob. I saw those. Yes, they are. Others like California and New York are doubling down on traditional regulation, more oversight, more requirements, more complexity. Well, for a long while, it's taken forever to get things permitted in California. Well, I suspect that shift is going to happen really, really quick now. I think there are a few things that are going to be loosened up and straightened out, and you're going to be seeing kind of a adapting of what is working, especially in places like Hong Kong, because the Chinese live in 2050. America right now is living in 1998. Okay. The federal government, what are they doing? They're most likely pretending this is not happening. Yeah, absolutely. But here's what's really interesting. The market is making these decisions for them. Construction companies are voting with their feet. They're moving to states with simpler regulations and embracing new technologies. Workers are following the jobs. Investment is following the workers. We're seeing a massive geographical redistribution of the construction industry, and with it, a redistribution of economic opportunity. The states that figure this out first are going to dominate the next decade of American growth. The states that don't are going to be left behind. What is the human cost? The human cost side of this story. Remember, Mike, our contractor from Miami? While I was researching this episode, I called him back to see how his permit situation was going. Good news, he finally got his permit 6 months later. Bad news, the client canceled the project. They couldn't wait any longer. This is right where I need to tell you, you need to contact Signature Permitting Services, 850-778-3110. Leave a message or email us, signaturepermitting@gmail.com. Yes, we kept our Gmail account. We've had it since 1998. We're not going to change it. We keep it that way because most people remember it. So, signaturepermitting@gmail.com. Drop me an email and let's get as many of you situated and straightened out. We are in the middle right now of updating 163,000 contractors within the state of Florida, and we are getting a lot of new accounts. And I am going to replicate myself. I think what I'm going to start doing is putting out some lessons, courses for other people to become premium permitting supervisors that can actually help contractors get their documents in and get them in one time, the first time, instead of hop, skip, jumping and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so Mike told me something that really stuck with me. He said, Allison, I've been building things my whole life. I'm good at what I do, but I feel like the world changed around me and nobody told me. That broke my heart. It broke my heart because, like I said earlier, these guys are guys that have been doing this for years. One of my favorite contractors has been doing this for 40 years. And there are tips, tricks that he knows that I have used to implement within my permitting business. And that has helped me persuade and pivot and help other contractors to be at a more advantaged position. And because of that knowledge and because of that know-how, I was able to do a lot of what I wanted to do in order to assist and get things moving forward for people that I've grown to care for. But what Mike told me, that absolutely, that broke my heart, because it's of no fault of his own. It's not of his making. And to me, that's the real story here. It's not just about technology or regulations or economics. It's about people whose entire way of life is being transformed, and often without their input or consent. So the construction workers who can't afford the training for new technologies are taking it. The ones that can't. The small contractor who can't compete with automated systems, The communities that lose their local builders to national corporations. This transformation isn't just changing how we build, it changes who gets to build and who gets left behind. One of the things that this showed me and taught me how to, as I said before, pivot. One of the things that I've actually done too is within one of our subscription packages, we've also included the lead generation aspect, the ability to connect the contractor to the client, and the client not having to be concerned, worried, or disturbed about whether or not their contractor is vetted, is licensed, is bonded, and is credible. We do all of that. The contractors that we have within our partnership subscription, we've gone ahead and we have actually vetted them completely. So the client is also vetted to make sure that they are able to pay for their projects. The contract that is done between the contractor and the client is one that comes from my notary public stage, which protects them both, and also it clearly outlays and lays out exactly what's being done, what the scope of work is. So there are no surprises, there are no shortcuts, there are no guessing. Yeah. So what are we going to be looking forward to in the future? Where does this all lead? I think we're looking at a future with two construction industries. Personally, I'm prepared for both, but let me break it down for you. Industry one is traditional construction, highly regulated, labor intensive, expensive, slow. This will handle renovations, custom homes, complex commercial products. It will employ fewer people, but pay them well. Industry two is the automated construction, lightly regulated, technology intensive, cheap, fast. This will handle mass housing, standard commercial buildings, infrastructure. It will employ different people with different skills. The thing that pops up to me in that from a permitting standpoint, because don't forget, every single piece of paper that I handle, or digital paper that I handle, is a legal document. So that legal document has to be written and in place, regardless of which industry any contractor is married to, if you will. They still have to adhere to the permitting regulations, because even if you are building a modular, as I said earlier, building structure, whatever addition, it still has to adhere to the standard, the basic of building, which is if it is repaired, replaced, restored, renovated, you must have a permit. That's it. Nothing else. Whatever changes you're doing, it must have a permit. If you're doing a change out of an air conditioning unit, must be permitted. If it is a residential or commercial, makes no never mind, must be permitted. Like I said earlier, two things that don't need to be permitted: painting, residential, and pressure washing. But both require a notice of commencement, because the notice of commencement protects the worker slash contractor, whether licensed or not, that's doing the job, and the homeowner or property owner. So that has to be adhered to, because let me tell you, regardless of which state you live in, code enforcement, they know when something is being done or being changed. Why? Because you always have a nosy neighbor. You always have someone else that sees something going on that will pick up the phone, that will call them. Not because they're curious or nosy, simply because they know that is in their best interest as a member of that community, that that information is shared with the jurisdiction in which they live or work. Just letting you know. Nothing like getting a judgment, and nothing like paying $500 a day for an infraction. Okay, so the question isn't whether this will happen, it's already happening. The question is whether we'll manage this transition thoughtfully or let it happen chaotically. Because here's the thing, construction isn't just another industry, it is the industry that builds the physical foundation of our society. How we handle this transformation will determine what kind of construction, what type of country we become. Do we want a country where only tech-enabled companies, let me reread that. Do we want a country where only tech-enabled companies can build affordably, where traditional skills become obsolete, where economic opportunity concentrates in a few innovation-friendly states? Or do we want a country that finds a way to preserve what works, but traditional construction will embrace what's promising about new methods? I believe that. So here is my call to action. The call to action is, here's what I think we need to do. First, we need to acknowledge that the transformation is happening. Too many policymakers are still pretending we can regulate 21st century construction with 20th century rules. No, that's just stupid. Second, we need to invest in worker transition. The people who build America deserve a chance to participate in this rebuilding. It's only fair. That means training programs, education support, and pathways from old skills to new ones. Third, we need smart regulation, not less regulation, smart regulation, rules that protect safety and quality while enabling innovation. Fourth, we need to have this conversation publicly, hence this podcast episode. The future of construction affects everyone, but most people don't even know it's changing. They don't. The same way that most people will sit and they'll tell you, I'm not sure what happened politically. Yeah, you're busy living your life that you're living yourself out of existence. So, time to pick up the ball and pay attention. That's why I'm telling you this story tonight, because the decisions we make about construction in the next 5 years will shape America for the next 50. I don't even think it's going to be really the next 5 years, to be honest with you. I think because of all the crap that has happened the past 8 months, you are going to see what I call the stretching of the seams, because the tariffs are going to, exacerbate that. The tariffs are definitely going to push this monster to the edge, and God help it if we go over. Because I work in a digital space, I can pivot, I can change, and I can adjust. But my buddies, my friends that are working in analog, in the space where there are two kinds of contractors, in my opinion. They're the good old boys and the boys that want to outsource everything. And I have a couple of good old boys that are my contractors. These are the guys that the thing that carries it over for them for dealing with me is because I'm prior military. So that kind of shuts the noise down for them a little bit. However, what seems to be the gas in the fuel kind of thing for them is the fact that they're amazed at what I know. Well, I know this because I love doing this. And also I love doing this because I love puzzle pieces. This is a really good industry to be in. And to do the work that I do requires I must pay attention. I must be able to do what I do the way I do it, because it's really fundamental. It really is. It supports and it takes care of every single human being. So, like I said, I don't think this is going to be the next 5 years. I think we're looking at 3 or less. I really do. So the next time you pass a construction site, take a closer look, all right? Is it traditional workers with traditional tools, or is it robots and 3D printers and automated systems? Is it a local contractor who's been in business for decades, or is it a tech company that didn't exist 5 years ago? Because what you're seeing isn't just construction, it's the future of America's industry. And it's happening right now, one build at a time. Now, I will say this. I am Allison. This has been Allison Knows, and now you know too. If this episode opened your eyes to what's really happening in construction, share it, because the more people who understand this transformation, the better chance we have of managing it well. And if you are in the construction industry, and whether you're a traditional contractor like Mike or working for a tech Enabled Company, I want to hear from you. Your stories matter, your perspective matters, because this isn't just about buildings. It's about the people who build them and the country we're building it for all of us. So until next time, keep asking questions, keep connecting the dots, and keep knowing. This is Allison Knows. I appreciate you. I thank you. Have a good night.